So a few months ago, I built my first terrarium and I did not do a very good job with it. This is where it lives in my bedroom. It's on a bamboo vertical shelf. I had plants on it, but I realized that the plants weren't getting enough light and it ended up being a perfect place for the terrarium. Focally, I love seeing this terrarium every day. It really lifts my mood. And so I've looked into terrarium building a lot more since I put this together. As you can see, I've got an addition to this terrarium and then there's something missing, but we can start with this rock. This rock was added rather recently. I found this in my front yard and I noticed it right away. It had interesting veining. I really like the coloring and the texture is interesting. The way that light hits it and it's a bit reflective is really nice. So I picked it up and dusted it off. And when I saw that kind of veining right there, I thought I'm gonna take it in, wash it off, and it's going into the terrarium. And as you can see, each side kind of has its own vibe. It looks different from all angles. And so I turn it around a few times trying to understand. And I hit right here and go, that is what I want to sit top side up. So I really like that color. I like the veining that's there. And the Calathea zebrina that I put in here, I'm pretty sure I overwatered it, and so that was a huge mistake and one that I'd be really horrified to repeat, honestly. So for now, no plants in the terrarium, just the moss. And to be honest, I did not know enough about moss when I decided to put it in here. I couldn't tell the difference between real moss, faux moss, and so I wasn't watering it, I wasn't misting it enough, and it started to yellow up. So I have this little spray bottle that I got from Target. It's not very powerful, but it fits really well in here. And I just use distilled water now on the moss. Since I've been really focusing on the moss a little bit more, it's greened up, it's starting to fill out, it looks much better than it did. And it's given me a whole new interest and appreciation in moss and in growing moss. So I thought I do have extra moss, and now that I know a little bit more about how to set up a terrarium, why not put on some music? So I've been listening to the New Wave station on Apple Music and break out my other sphere-like container. As you can see, it's smaller than this original container. If you look at the top left corner, by the way, that gallon jug is actually full of diluted neem oil. The Argentea, you can see its sleeve peeking out over there. That's what I've been using to treat its spider mites. But I also have charcoal here. I realized, so when I did the first terrarium, I just put down gravel. I realize now that I also need some charcoal, and I should probably also be using a substrate. So I'm going to be using peat moss on top of the charcoal. And then I'll also add a little worm castings too. You'll see me do that as I start getting going. But I break out my gravel at first. This is what I used in the first one. Here's the river rock that I mixed with it. I'm gonna put both of these into the terrarium and then give it a good mix. Now, this moss, this is the leftover moss. I put it into this was like a lettuce container, and this is one of the ways that I do try to upcycle things. I poked holes in the top, threw the moss into it, squirted it with some water, and it is still damp. It's been months. I couldn't believe it. And since I've been looking online and trying to understand a little bit more about moss, one of the things that I learned is that's very similar to how some people might propagate moss. So I was very excited. The first thing I did though getting started was I rinsed out the container, but I didn't dry off the inside, just the outside. So I'm gonna start out with a little bit more moisture in here and roll the gravel around a little bit in it so that it's also a little bit moist. Now, as I've been researching terrariums, I have found a whole new vocabulary and a whole new world out there of people who build terrariums and landscapes, aquascapes, waterscapes, and let me be really upfront that I am a total novice, a complete amateur. This is my second terrarium. The first one I'm not even sure if it's technically a terrarium. I like to think of it as one. However, I know it now that it was missing all of those elements. So while I have this newfound interest, I also realized that I am in the very beginning stages of understanding how to set up a basic terrarium, but hopefully one day I'll be able to have my own aquascape or something cool like that. So now that I've got that first layer of gravel in, I go ahead and I put in my charcoal, and I try to do as even a layer as possible. However, one of the things that I do notice at the end, and I'll show you, is that I do get the gravel, or the charcoal rather, under the gravel a bit. I kind of get it down the side, and so visually from the outside, the layers aren't as appealing, so I already know that I've got a little bit of... And there's my dog. My dog really thought I was doing something that would end with food. And certainly not. I'm building a terrarium and you can't eat the moss, so I don't think he believes me. I think he wants to eat the moss. Sorry. So I definitely have a lot more to learn, and my technique on kind of layering this can definitely, there's room for improvement, let's say, because I definitely get it down the side. And it is not, like I said, it's really not that visually appealing. So I do try to get the layer as even as I can and make sure that I've got enough. But I dropped a lot of it, like right here. A lot of it, it just got everywhere. I think I needed to use a bigger scoop. Now I'm putting in the peat moss. And so like I said, I missed this step the first time too. There was no substrate. I didn't have anything in there, just the gravel. Now I'm not adding any plants, like I said. I'm not gonna be putting plants inside of a terrarium after what happened with my calathea. Eventually, if I can get like an aquascape going, I've got a few plants that I could divide that would live really well underwater. I feel like that is probably at least 6 years to a month, maybe six years. Maybe I just actually spoke the truth. I was gonna say 6 months to a year, but who knows? I have these larger river rocks as well. And so I decided that I want to build up a little area of rocks, and instead of having one mound of moss, of creating, when I look down on it, creating divisions. So I put on one side, I start to stack these rocks up one by one, and I'm trying to get them to where they are pretty secure. Because if I have to move this, I don't want it falling over. And I found this other rock in my front yard too. It looks just like a potato, right? It looks just like a potato. So I brought that in and cleaned it up and decided to add it into the terrarium as well. And now time for the moss. Watch this. Yeah, the moss is really difficult when I try to set it down. A lot of times it comes right back out with the tweezers. So it takes me a minute to get this moss in place. And I have a few different types of moss here. This is a very basic moss kit, and it's got some organic matter like that you see mixed in with it. So I like to put a little bit of that down and then a bit of moss. I put this piece of white moss in here, but I end up taking it out, putting it back. I fiddled with it a little bit because I really wasn't sure about it. It was a much larger piece than any of the other pieces of moss in here. So yeah, I finally decide, maybe that doesn't look kind of how I want it. So I grabbed some other moss and some of that organic matter and added that in instead. So I'm starting to like this. I know, I want a couple focal points. So I've got polished rose quartz here and then a polished moonstone. So I'm just adding those in as well. I'm really not sure about the moonstone, to be honest with you, or the rose quartz, but I did find more mushrooms at Target. These were on clearance maybe a month or so ago. And I decided definitely gonna add those. I really like them in the first one. I knew I would like them here too. And I do end up liking it. Again, though, I'm really not sure about that moonstone. Let me know, do you think the moonstone looks good there? I mean, maybe I should. I feel like it doesn't really fit with this. And then this song has been stuck in my head for days, so it was very cathartic to listen to it. Very satisfying, and honestly, such a good song. So I'm pretty happy with it. I like the way that it's turned out. I think it'll look really good in the plant room. And I'm also giving my leftover, I still have leftover moss, and I got some video of it because I want to know, I'm going to check on this in a few months. I'm going to see if I'm being successful at all at propagating it. Maybe, maybe not. But here are those layers. You can see what I'm saying. They just were not very neat. I'm happy with it from the top. I do like it. I like the way that it looks. Very simple though, I'll be honest. But yeah, look at those layers. They're just really messy. And so I know I've got a lot to learn there in the technique that I'm using. And this is what it looks like in the plant room. This is where I was thinking it might be a good addition. Like I said, I really enjoy having the one in my bedroom, so I really like having this in my plant room as well. Just adds a little bit more to this space. I hope that you are finding things to keep you occupied like I am. And until next time, be well and take care.